Welcome to the Core 366 podcast, where we're pushing you daily to get back to the basics spiritually, mentally, and physically. And I am your host, Apostle Sophia M. Johnson.
Hello. Welcome back, you guys. Thank you for joining us today. I am so super excited. Y'all know I've been having guests with me on this podcast for the last season, and this season is no different. I still have guests coming on with me, just sharing their stories, talking about being a wife, or even with couples, husband and wives coming on together and just talking about their journey together and what it has been like, how they communicate with each other, all of those good things, those things that we don't seem to talk about often because we're like, oh, don't nobody need to know that. But, there are some people that's in waiting, and so they need to know, what is it all about? Y'all been married 30 years, so how'd y'all stay married that long? So I'm super excited to have with me today Mrs. Nikki Moorhead. And y'all, she is, let me tell you, beautiful inside and out. When I first met her, I was like, I'm one of them people that I don't meet a stranger, so it don't matter. I'm like, hey girl, come on, let's go have lunch. I don't know if you should do that with everybody. Hold on, have some discernment. Come on, we'll have a little discernment.
Yeah.
Because if you look, because you got some people that's weird. But I love meeting new people, and I love how the Lord caused our relationship to come together. And so that's the same thing the Lord did with me and her. Like, God was like, okay, y'all gonna meet, and then he didn't have us talk no more after that. I was like, wait a minute, now what happened?
Right? Yes. Yeah.
But y'all, I can't wait to ask her some of these questions, but I'm gonna let her go ahead and introduce herself because y'all know I like to have fun and talk stuff. So I'm gonna be quiet and I'm gonna let her go ahead and introduce herself. Go ahead. Hey, how you doing?
All right. I'm good. I'm Nikki Moorhead. I am 34 years old. I am a wife, a mother, a disciple in progress, I like to say, a graceful lady in waiting. No, I'm just kidding. No, grace is growing every lesson. So I am also project manager for my husband's contracting company. We had a special needs child, and so my schedule was always very constricted and centered around healthcare and keeping all his needs met and in order. So I had to have something that was convenient schedule wise, and so I do that from home. And we're very 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 busy like all the other moms and wives out there. So
yeah,
I'm excited to be here today, and I'm a very transparent person. My husband Andy is just like Miss Sophia, so I'm used to the whole not meeting a stranger and connecting immediately. So I appreciate that. I think God's timing was a divine appointment. I truly and genuinely believe that. And then the seasons that we weren't communicating, I'll go into that in detail later on, and then how God kind of brought this back together.
That part, because I'm telling you. So yeah, okay. So let me tell you. So when I started doing the interviews on this podcast, so it's the Core 366. I just started reaching out to different wives, and I was like, "Hey, can y'all, jump on?" And some people was able to do it then, and then some people weren't. And I was like, "Oh Lord, like I need more people. I need more people." And it was funny because when she came up to me and she was like, "So when we gonna do the interview?" And y'all, I was like, what interview is she talking about? Because you know how it is, because like you said, busy and got so much going on. I was like, interview.
Mm-hmm.
And I've already interviewed her for other stuff before. Right. And so I was like, now what did I message Nikki about this time?
Right. Right. Me too, because when we met, I was at a different place with my life and ministry and being a mother and a wife, and it was shortly after I had lost my son, and then so when we reconnected again at flag football a couple months back, I was in a much different season then, so going from one season and then having that gap and then back in this season really just is a testament to, like I said, God's timing being divine. Because had I seen maybe 9 months ago, maybe that wouldn't have been the story. I wouldn't have asked about an interview or a podcast. At that time, I didn't feel like I was in a place to be able to do so. So I just think it's cool how his timing is divine, and I have no problem being, like I said, answering questions. I don't just, talking about my story and my background doesn't bother me, especially in the season I'm in right now. I know that we don't go through things just for ourselves, but for who's going to go through it next, and what we can apply to them, and how we can help pull them out of the pit. And I very much so believe in the transparency and in a story to be able to do those things that the Lord has called me to do.
Yes. Listen, because I'm telling you, because I was sitting there and I was like, and because I've emailed so many different people and I've talked to so many different people, and I was like, Lord, I was like, what did, and then I was like, yes. But the thing about it was, sometimes the Lord will have us to ask somebody something, and then he'll be like, okay, you were supposed to plant that seed, you were supposed to put that out there, you were supposed to let them know this is what you got going on, for not for today, but for tomorrow.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times I've been in positions where I thought it was for today,
Mm-hmm.
and it was really for
Right.
tomorrow.
Yes, me
And
too.
so I was like, okay. I was like, all right, Lord, we got this. We're gonna do this. I said,
Mhm.
I can't wait. I'm excited.
Right. Yeah, me too. Me too.
Listen. So we're gonna jump into our very first question.
Okay.
And I want to ask you about your son, but that's probably gonna be second. But I
Okay.
want to ask you this question first,
Okay.
because this season and last season has been mainly about wives and wives in waiting. And like you said, the nuggets that we can drop that'll
Mhm.
help, like, not just in your marriage, not just in your relationship with your fiance, but even with your homegirl, your homeboy. Like,
Mhm.
these are things that the things that we drop in this podcast will help you in every aspect of your life, even on your job. Because
Right.
you'll be like, oh man, I could
Mhm.
use that going towards this. We
Right.
don't look at it like that, but it truly can go towards any situation in your life.
Yeah.
And so this first question goes into a thought process.
Okay.
So when you came into marriage, what was your thought process? Because I know for me, I didn't grow up in a home where there was a husband and a wife.
Mhm.
And so my thought process, because I didn't really get to live in it, I saw it, but I didn't really understand the journey of it.
Mhm.
What was your thought process coming into marriage? Like, mine was a little jacked up. So that's just me being honest.
Well, yeah, and I would have to agree with you there. Mine was too. Like I was telling you yesterday, I was raised in a very dysfunctional, broken home. My parents divorced when I was, the process started when I was 9, and it lasted several years, and it was a very traumatic custody battle, and with kidnapping involved, and self harm,
Mm,
and addiction, and treatment centers, and it was all of the drama rolled into one divorce, basically. Actually, in the court paperwork that I just kind of went through recently, my little brother had, the judge found both of my parents deemed unfit, but he had to pick somebody.
mm,
So that's kind of how we were left. But for me, at that time, when I met my husband Andy, and we've been together 15 years, married for 10. Um, I was just at that time, I was a lot younger, and I had my special needs son Bryce from a previous relationship. And Bryce was, I think he was younger than 2 years old when I met Andy. And Andy immediately, where I needed stability, and Andy immediately needed like somebody to help take care of things for him, like a kind of like a caregiver, like I was naturally doing for my son Bryce. He was in the transition of finalizing his previous marriage and kind of moving on in life with his daughter. And then I had Bryce, and I was a single young mom, kind of not really knowing what to do, not many resources, etc. So I went into it, like you said, with the jacked up perspective that this person was going to help meet my needs, basically, and
mm.
that love could be exchanged, that that as long as I did for him, then he could do for me, and I could provide stability for the situation I was in with my son Bryce. um, And I say that's jacked up, and I don't mean to offend anybody that's in a similar situation or has that similar mindset. But I say that because here recently, and I just mean very recently, the Lord has been reminding me that He wants me to allow Him to heal all my hurts. He wants me to
Yes.
allow Him to be the one that I depend on. He wants me to allow Him to provide me stability mentally and emotionally and physically. And I very much sought after Andy in the beginning years, especially to do that for me instead of the Lord.
Ooh, listen. And see, you about to make me go somewhere.
Yeah.
That's exactly where I was, but I didn't know it when I went into it. I thought I was doing good.
Right, me too. Yeah, I didn't either. Like I did, it wasn't. It was actually my husband that kind of revealed that to me. In the after several years of being together, because it was kind of crazy. We met on a blind date. We immediately got together. Things went so fast. I already had a child. He had custody of his daughter. Her mother was out of the picture. I had to step into an immediate stepmother role. Step in to help him with his business, to help financially, be a special needs caregiver full time, and my husband is actually my first ever serious relationship in my life. I had a child with a previous man, but we were never in true relationship with one another. So I don't have any other experience with any other relationships aside from the husband that I have. So, like you said, I didn't know those things about myself until they were revealed to me kind of and pointed out later on. And like I said, I didn't even really remember the approach and the mindset and how complex it was until just recently.
Liz, because it's so I'll say this, like when you said he pointed out some stuff.
Mhm.
My husband did the same thing, and so when you said that, it reminded me of what the Lord said to me about my husband. He
Mhm.
said, I made him specifically for you. That's how he can say, okay, this, and he
Right.
can say that. And it may hurt your feelings because you're like, no, that's not true.
Mhm.
But it really is. He's not
Mhm.
saying that to hurt your feelings. He's
Right.
saying that so that you can do what needs to be done to fix the problem.
Mhm. Yes.
And it doesn't always feel good. Like I know for a fact, it does not always feel good. It hurts, and it's like, but it only hurts like that is because it really hit that thing,
Mhm.
and it's like, and then because okay, so the Lord was showing me, Sophia, I wanted you to deal with your issues prior to marriage, but you wanted to get married so badly.
Yeah. That's so true too. Same situation here. I just, because, and I know it definitely was directly associated with the past in my childhood, but I had no stability from early childhood to adolescence to being a teenager, being a pregnant teenager, being a young mother, then a special needs mother. There was no real consistency and stability pretty much anywhere for many, many years. And so when I met Andy, and, like immediately he wanted me to move in and just like got me a phone. I just remember how like big of a deal that was, that somebody cared enough about me to get me a phone, because I hadn't had that before.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very attracted to that at the time, not realizing, that I guess you could say, it wasn't an intentional, mature mindset to begin with, And like
Mm-hmm.
I said, when my feelings get hurt, when things get pointed out, I have found, especially here lately, that 9 times out of 10 is because those things are true, and I have real issue with accepting them.
Ooh, because it's really them holding us accountable.
Yeah, it is.
And they're like, no, this is what you got going on.
Right. And I truly believe that, like, we were made for one another. Like, I believe that the way that I was designed mentally, intellectually, physically, emotionally, it was specifically fit for Andy. And I believe that he was designed all those ways just for me, too. So, those times that we're not able to agree, or the times that we it's hard to hear things from one another. I truly believe it's those are the situations and the instances in which we were made for our differences to allow us to be dynamic instead of be so controversial or disturbing.
Yes, yes. Oh my girl, Nikki. Honey, we may need to just do the whole season with just me and you, because I promise you this is not I don't think we're gonna be able to get all of this in at once. Oh my goodness, I can feel it now. Ooh. So you already sort of kind of hit on the whole the household that you grew up in.
Yes.
Dude, I mean, you sort of kind of hit it, but I'm gonna still ask this
Yeah.
part of it.
Yeah.
Do you feel because I know that could impact how you see everything.
Yeah.
So, is you ready for this question?
Yeah.
So, were you looking? Okay, so I
I love
know that
sharing
at
on
some
the
point,
podcast tonight, so go ahead.
I know that I know that I was looking for a father figure. I didn't know that's what I was looking
Yeah.
for,
Mm-hmm.
but that's what I was looking for when the
Well,
Lord started pointing that thing out.
yes.
And then the Lord began to show me how my mindset was like, because He would say something, and immediately I would say, "You ain't my daddy, and tell me what to do."
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
But then the Lord be like, "But that's how you be treating him sometimes." Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I expect you to provide for me like so, but when you talk to me like so, you can kick rocks. And see, that's like I said, that was an immature mindset and flaw with me, because people are going to treat them the way that they're going to respond the way that you treat them, So we put them in that box of being that figure that we lacked, and then when their characteristics begin to shift in that manner, and we get offended, or we don't, or we kind of want to be hands off, then I mean, we only really have ourselves to blame at that point.
Come on.
I
Come
mean,
on.
but I mean, that's just not something that you can. It's not something that you're going to be immediately able to recognize or accept out of the gate. I mean, that's why there's a time for everything. There's a time to sow and there's a time to reap. I mean, and the same with those instances right there.
Yes. So, because that's what I realized later, and the Lord began to show it to me. He said, I wanted to deal with your childhood trauma,
Mm-hmm.
but you were just like, "Oh, I'm so in love," which the Lord told me He is your husband, but you were just so caught up in the whirlwind of love
Right.
that
Right.
you couldn't see that there was some deeper stuff that had nothing to do with him,
Right.
but everything to do with you and the
Mm-hmm.
fact that you were not completely whole when you went into this thing.
Right. Right. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I know Andy wasn't completely whole whenever he entered into this. Like I said, we kind of both had a need. Mine was greater than his, obviously. And then, we met and it was a whirlwind. And then, immediately we, were able to fill that need for one another. But yes, my like I said, my background, my father, my mother have always had very complicated relationships with both of them as an adult because of everything that happened in our childhood. And I'm definitely not one of those adults that blames their entire life problems on their parents or their past. There's been a lot of forgiveness there when it wasn't even asked for, because that's how, that's modeling the behaviors of Jesus. And I mean, a lot of therapy. I've done EMDR trauma therapy for my past. I've dealt with night terrors from the past. I've dealt with insecurity in all my relationships because of the past. My relationship with my parents, being, tossed and torn at such a young age, so drastically from all these different temperaments to another, and being caught in a war between two people that are so hurt that they don't know what to do other than to continue to hurt one another, and then just being a bystander of that. But that whole, my whole childhood was consumed by it. It's a miracle that, I'm even able to be in a relationship for 15 years, in my opinion. It's just the Lord.
Look, exactly. I get that 100% because
Mhm.
I was in the kitchen cleaning one day. And I think I shared this in this podcast before, and I said it hit me all of a sudden. The Lord said, if he was not the one created for you, he would have been gone a long time ago.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
so so
I've
he's
got something to put
yours.
to that in one of your later on questions, but yeah, I get what you mean.
Yeah, like he was created for you.
Mhm,
So with you having your son Bryce
mhm.
and everything that he had going on, how did that impact your marriage? Because there are some people who feel like if they have children and they get married, they come into the marriage with children, or
Mhm.
even the husband coming in with children, that it can go left. Like sometimes it doesn't work out. But how did that impact your marriage? Like how did that, you know?
Well, like I said a little while ago, in the beginning, especially, Andy was very much like my and Bryce's, source of stability. Bryce thrived, being special needs, he thrived off of consistency and routine and stability, just like I did. Because we personally, Bryce and I, were able to thrive in the environment that we were in. Even though it was like a lot of responsibility and my first time in a true relationship, we were able to thrive in that environment because neither one of us had that yet. And Bryce was like under 2 years old, but the first 2 years I had him in and out of the hospital. We moved all over the place. I think I had two apartments. We lived with several people, so like I said, he thrived as well as I did. And with Andy needing the stability and the support with having custody of his daughter, he he's a very good father, but he's always been more, like the mothers are more of the caregivers of the children. That's just the way of nature. So, he was kind of clueless as to how to just be a parent alone without the support of her biological mother. So, stepping
Mhm.
into that role for me, also provided further stability, for me, and gave me more of a purpose, I guess you could say. It helped me to mature rather quickly. And I used to complain about that, but I'm actually thankful for that because I could see where that could have caused a lot of problems. But in the later years, when Bryce began to get real sick, and we got to where just the Gulf Coast did not have the resources that we needed because he was diagnosed with something very rare. It's called Kabuki makeup syndrome, and at the time, 8, 9 years ago, when he was first diagnosed with it, we had spent many years in and out of the hospital and different specialists trying to get that diagnosis. And then once we got it, as he grew older and developed, things worked, but they didn't work quite correctly. So the resources were not here, which meant we spent a lot of time away from home, a lot of time out of this city. And
Mhm.
like, having my stepdaughter here, and then by that point I had our younger son, my youngest son Mason, and then being Andy's only support system for the business, and having him here with those responsibilities and me gone with Bryce's responsibilities. That is when things with our marriage started to change dramatically. And
Mhm.
it was a lot. It was the constant pressure and stress of feeling like I was torn between two locations. It was him, the constant pressure and stress of him trying to adapt to managing an environment that he wasn't used to being the primary manager of, with the kids at home. And it was, long distance. It was very much like a long distance relationship those first couple years that Bryce was real sick. So, definitely in the beginning it was better, but that's just, it took quite a while for us to adapt to the new kind of order of things.
Yeah, yeah. Because, a lot of parents, when stuff like that happens, because, okay, so can you go into a little bit about the later years of Bryce and leading up to
Yeah.
his passing,
Yes.
and how that, because a lot of people, when they lose children,
Hmm.
it they some of them end up divorced
Hmm.
because
Oh,
the grief.
well, yeah, I think the statistics are like 76% of parents,
Mm.
3 parents end up in divorce within the first 5 years. And I will be just transparent and say, Andy and I had been in and out of therapy before we ever even considered divorce because of the stress of the dynamic of our relationship and the just the different complications that we had along the way. So, but then as Bryce began to get, sick, his responsibilities became greater. I didn't get to sleep very much. He was on a feeding pump that beeped and errored all the time. That was a major issue. Andy had to have sleep so that he could go to work the next day. He had to have help and support for the business because that is still my role. It was my role then, and it's still my role now. But like I said, when I wasn't in Mobile, or when all of my time and attention and insomnia was going towards Bryce and his needs, it made that very complicated to be able to fulfill any other roles. Like I said, I really dealt with the constant feeling of torn between different worlds and different roles.
Mhm.
As women, God designed us to be able to wear many different hats. We're naturally multitaskers, we're naturally caregivers, we're naturally empathetic, and we handle stress better than men. I mean, it's just statistical information here in the way that we're designed. But
Yeah.
in those seasons, I was not. That's not how I responded to things. I was stressed. I was forgetful. I couldn't manage all the different things, and therefore, I mean, it did greatly impact my marriage. And my husband felt um, not so much jealous because our child was sick, but at the same time,
Mhm.
it was, he felt kind of abandoned, and
Mm.
he knew that it wasn't me abandoning him, but it still felt like so.
Yeah.
So that caused friction, and then the long distance between it. So with Kabuki syndrome, Bryce's major organs were all affected, and he would get scans every year on everything, and he had kidney disease and things of that nature. But when he would get scans, things would look totally wacky, but they would always say, "We don't know how, but it works great." Well, as he got older, those different organs, the scans would look wacky and things weren't working so great. So
Mhm.
we had to begin going back and forth to UAB Children's Hospital in Birmingham. So, and all the time we went, it was like an urgent or emergent thing. So, like at the drop of a dime, we'd have to drive 4 hours. It got to where with Bryce, if he even got a little cold, I had a suitcase packed because, when you have to go, you have to go.
Yeah.
Things with Bryce were so, his immune system being so weak, and he was always so at risk for everything. So several years back, I think Bryce was maybe 12. He had to have a kidney surgery because of the pain he had been having with his kidneys. And our specialist was in Birmingham. So we had surgery, and went we were actually discharged like the very next morning. He was doing great. And then the next morning we woke up and he was like full blown septic. And so we were put
Mm.
back into the hospital. It took them several days to figure out that he was septic. So by that point, the sepsis had developed at that point to where, we almost lost him. He was in ICU. He was put on a vent for a little while. He did eventually come out of that, but not without many physical consequences because of the sepsis going untreated until they
Yeah.
discovered it. Well, after that, his intestines and stomach, he just lost all motility. So he went from a normal G tube feeding tube to a GJ, which is where they do interventional radiology, and they insert it into the jejunum. Well, Mobile is in the process of getting an interventional radiology department now, several years after he's passed, but they did not have one 7, 8 years ago. So we would have to go to Birmingham, being it his only source of nutrition and getting nutrients into him. If it failed or clogged or malfunctioned, we were gone. I didn't have any other choice. So it was also very much like for many years I was able to be his caregiver, and we had a routine and structure, and then all of a sudden things were just going from bad to worse. And it was like every time I turned around, I had to make a drastic decision, and no matter which way I decided, it was going to affect him, and we just didn't know how much so until after the decision was already made. So like with the kidney surgery, I opted to do that because of the pain. They could have helped. They could have waited until he was a little bit older, but he was suffering, and I didn't want to see him suffering anymore. So things of
Mhm.
that nature. And then, just being under the constant stress, being in a hospital all the time, you don't get any sleep whatsoever. So then, I I was not kind all the time. I was stressed to the max and torn between worlds, and a lot of guilt for my children that I had to leave behind, that, their lives were suffering without me in regards to like school and things of that nature. And it was just really hard to work through those. So, like I said, Andy and I have been in therapy multiple times. I'm not ashamed to admit it. We had therapy today.
Hey, I mean, whatever it takes, because I know for a fact that you love that man,
Mm-hmm.
honey. And I know for a fact that he loves you and your daughter and your son. They
Yeah.
both love you and him. And so
Yeah.
do what needs to be done. Cause I mean, cause you can see it. Cause even though he doesn't do a whole lot of smiling and stuff,
Yeah.
but when he look at you, it's like, yeah,
I know.
that's my wife.
I know. I'm thankful for that too. That's I know you had asked about the progression of Bryce's illness too. So um Bryce, several years back, we had to go. It was 4 years ago, just about. We had to go to UAB once again for a feeding tube replacement, and he had a minor cold. They had to take him back to the OR to do the feeding tube replacement. When he came out, he was sick and all that, and then they said he had rhinovirus like the next day. Well, then we came back to Mobile, and a couple days later, he woke up and had a huge like ball on his forehead, and basically what um, it was the infection had spread like basically to the bone marrow up here in his skull.
Mm,
And I mean, we're talking about something as simple as like rhinovirus is the common cold. So it was just the combination of like the stress on his body and being back in that OR, and his immune system being so weak. And so from there, we spent right at 8 months at the beginning of 2020 in women's and children's here in Mobile. And the reason we did that was because we could not stay away from home anymore. We had been back and forth to Birmingham the year before so often. We were there more than we were here in Mobile. And it was like weighing heavy on everybody. So when we were admitted here in Mobile, that was a lot better in a lot of different ways. But, then COVID hit in like
mm,
the end of February. So all of the privileges that we had, such as visitors and me being able to come and go as I please at the hospital, needing to get fresh air or needing to go get other food or just take a break or whatever, all of those privileges, like the laundry room for parents, all those privileges were stripped away because of COVID. And then he couldn't have visitors, which meant I couldn't have visitors. I couldn't hardly leave without going through this whole rigmarole process. And he's like, in the meantime, he's having like surgery after surgery after surgery because they're constantly trying to fix this. So it was osteomyelitis of the frontal skull. It escaped me a few minutes ago, but and then that eventually turned into it eventually got into his brain, and I guess it was in May of the end of May or June in 2020, and infectious disease comes in for like the 500th time, and they want to tell me about this whole new regimen of antibiotics that they want to start. And I had met with so many caseworkers and physicians that week that I knew that this was like a last ditch effort. And we had like a 50-50 chance of going into remission for maybe 6 more months. And the antibiotics were just, I mean, Bryce was so over. He had very much had white coat syndrome. You couldn't do his blood pressure. You couldn't do anything without major him being, just disturbed by it all.
mm.
So, and he's begging me to go to the beach because it's summertime and he hasn't been to school in months and months and months. And he loves school and the school bus. And there was just so many things that, went into this decision. So after meeting with several, professionals in this regard with children's terminal diseases, it was decided that we would go home on hospice. And I declined that last round of treatment because it the treatments were to the point to where they were doing more harm than good.
Yeah.
And I didn't want something to happen to Bryson to not be able to take those opportunities to do all the things that he had been asking me about. So we came home on hospice, and the immediate family, and everybody, the community, everybody was very supportive and loving and just poured into us. They sent us to Disney World. We had a week at the beach. I mean, we just did we had a car show in his honor. I mean, we just did all the things. And he couldn't be happier. He was so cheeky because he was so popular. And he just loved that attention, like I do. I love it too. But he just loved that attention, like he thrived off of it. And then, it was about quality of life versus quantity at that point. So as the months went and through the summer went on, he required more and more pain medication, which caused seizures and epilepsy and things like that. And then he eventually had a stroke on October 23rd of 2020. And then we went to the hospital. Even though we were on hospice, we were at home for 20 something hours, and he didn't pass naturally. So they sent us to the hospital. I kind of had to choose between having him pass at home or pass in the hospital. So we went to the hospital, and I made sure that he would never know that he was back in the hospital, because he would have had a fit if he was coherent to know that.
Oh,
and then my husband and my children and I, we were in the hospital for about 3 days while Bryce was still actually breathing, but he was really no longer with us, and he passed on October 26, 2020.
Wow. Because and when you was talking about how he wanted to go do all those things, and I'm so glad you chose that, because you know how like sometimes parents be like, well, no, you got to stay here. I'm glad you allow him to have that opportunity to do that, because
Me too.
I mean,
It was the best time we had all had in years, because the last couple of years had been so rough, and his sickness had affected all of us in many different ways. I mean, that's just how it is. And all of us got, we got to experience some of the best memories any of us have had. And looking back, we're just so grateful for that time. We're grateful for the time that we had. He hung in there like a trooper for like 4 months and 13 days. And I mean, every day that he woke up and continued to want to go do things and experience things and all that, it was just a miracle. It was a true testament to God and the community of support that he had behind him, lifting him up.
Yeah. And I remember seeing the picture of y'all on the beach.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that. I was like, look, because I had just really met you around that time.
Yeah.
And so it is so, and I was looking at everything. I was like, wow. I was like, the support and everything, and just all of it.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I will say this, they say, and because I went to grief counseling before he passed, trying to prepare. I did a lot of things preemptively while he was on hospice, trying to prepare, because I'm just a planner and a type A personality. Some would say control freak, whatever. So trying to, being that my personality, trying to prepare for those things. I did a lot of research in that, being, they say that the first 5 years after you lose a child, it's expected for your world and your lives to be completely turned upside down. And my faith and my relationship with the Lord was so strong at that point that I was like, oh, no way, not me, not us, not I. Well, oh, sister, I was sadly mistaken, because several months after he passed and everybody's lives kind of started to go back to normal, Nikki was like, I didn't have any purpose. I had lost my identity, because for so many years now, my identity was wrapped up in being a caregiver. And I had no identity. I had no purpose, because of the severity of the grief and depression and anxiety. I was self-medicating, therefore making very bad decisions, therefore suffering negative consequences, just compounding to the problems that I was already dealing with being a bereaved parent. And yes, I'm very happy to say that today, like going into the holiday season ahead, this will be the best Christmas that I've had since Bryce passed, because of the peace that I have this holiday season.
Woo, come on here. Yeah, and that's the thing. A lot of times, so I ask a lot of moms because the Lord has called me to wives and wives in waiting. So of
Mhm.
course, when you hear me talking, I'm gonna talk about me talking
Yeah.
to wives, right? Or just to moms, period, or just women, period.
Hmm.
But I've asked a lot of women. I'd be like, hey, so those who have kids, I'm like, hey, so when the kids leave, what are you gonna do? And
Right.
they're looking at me sideways.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, when they move out and they have to go somewhere, what do you like? What do you have that is the thing that you like to do? Even if you didn't have the kids, what is the one thing that you love to do?
And I'll say this, I'm glad that you said that, because one of the hard lessons that I had to learn this last year is that my identity, although I was made to be Bryce's mother, it was not supposed to be my entire identity,
Uh
especially
huh.
when he got sick. I realize now what I didn't then is that I took a lot of things and kind of dealt with them and internalized them alone more often than not, even though I was faithful to my relationship and walk with the Lord, because I just felt like, I was supposed to be the one to take care of those things. And when you're left with that, when that's gone, whether he passed away or grown up and moved out and was able to take care of himself, like I was left very much feeling, what is my purpose now? Like, yeah, I'm still a
Mm,
mom and yeah, I'm still a wife, but those things didn't consume me all day, every day. Because, as women, we can wear multiple hats and be great multitaskers. So the Lord very much this last year has been revealing to me over and over and over again that it never really worked out with me advancing and growing and living out my calling for ministry like it was supposed to, because my time and attention was so much focused and my identity was wrapped up in Bryce's caregiver. Well, now that
mm-hmm.
it's not, and I'm past that season of despair and dark grief and depression and things of that nature, and my identity is more found in who I'm called to be and His will for me, then those doors have began to open.
Come on. You better speak about it because I'm telling you, the I didn't realize that I had an identity crisis
Hmm.
until the Lord began to reveal. So I was at an event
Hmm.
and the name of the event was Who Am I?
Yeah.
Of course, the Lord will put me at an event like that.
Right. Right.
And so someone is up in there talking about identity. I'm on the panel.
Yeah.
So she's getting ready to ask us questions. And she
Mhm.
says, "Who are you?" I said, "I don't know. I said, "I didn't know until just now." And she was, and everybody was like, "She got her on the panel and the woman don't know who she is." And then I began to explain it because in that moment, the Lord revealed to me while one of the ladies was answering the question,
Hmm.
the Lord revealed to me that my identity was in my mom, and my mom had been deceased for years since I was
Oh.
12. I
Hmm.
was a whole grown woman married with children
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
didn't know who I was
Right. Right.
because I was so wrapped up in me being with my mom all the time.
Hmm.
And so my identity was in her, but by this time my identity should have been in Christ, right?
Right. Right. I felt, and you feel kind of dumbfounded in those moments too, because you're like, I always say to myself when things are like brought to fruition with me, like, I'm such an intelligent person. I think, why, like, this does not make sense if that was my thought process all this time. Like,
Yes.
it just doesn't for me. And like you said, like, even though Bryce has been gone several years, it wasn't until really this past year that I truly understood what it meant to that, that was not ever what my identity was supposed to be. Like, it was
Yeah.
part of my story, and yes, it was my responsibility, but it was not what I was divinely created for. It was not the will that God has for me. It was not, you know, the testimony, of course, will be impactful, but it was not all that was supposed to take all my time and energy and effort.
Yes. Cuz yeah. So what I was seeing was, you know how like you said, the multiple things that we have, it was just one of those, it was just like a branch on
Hmm.
the tree,
Yeah.
but we made it the whole tree.
The whole tree. Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
And
And so it makes
listen,
sense to me now when my husband would say he felt neglected or he felt abandoned, and that makes sense to me now because that's how what I was doing to everything because I made that whole situation my purpose and my identity.
yes, listen, all the other branches was just out there like,
Exactly.
hello, like not saying
Like we
that they
need
didn't
water too.
support you in what you was doing, but it was
Uh-huh.
like, so you know how we'd be like, what about me?
Right. Right.
Like I know I need a little bit of your time. Because I think
Mhm.
that's how the Lord be feeling with us too, right?
Oh
Because
yeah.
we'll spend all this time doing everything else, and the Lord be like, "Oh, now you,
Mhm.
now you want to call me?
Yeah. Oh
Oh,
yeah.
all day you've been doing
Mhm.
all this, and now you want to call me right before you go to bed."
Right. Exactly. And too, something else that I've really been experiencing this last several months is that, he will strip away the idols. And idols can be wonderful things. Like I do idolize my husband sometimes, especially when things are going great. But at the same time, he will remove those things from your life when he
An
has divine
argument to
purpose and
come up.
relationship with you. Yes. And he will, and you're like, why is this happening to me? And the Lord's like, I just want you to make me a priority.
Ooh, come on.
Or like, why am I feeling so distant or disconnected from these other things? Or, and the Lord's like, I just want you to make a relationship with me priority. It's because of him that you have all those other things. So,
That part.
yeah.
That part right there. I'm telling you.
Mhm.
Whew, look, I feel like we done hit about 15,000 things in one. But it's good because a lot of people, because like you sharing your story, one about your okay, so you had to share the whole story about your son, like even if that wasn't the whole story, but the gist of it, the
Mhm.
meat of it, it needed to be said so that you could come back and say, well, my identity was in that. Y'all
Right,
see how much I spent doing that? Not
right,
because there could have been times where you could have took a break and allow the nurses or whoever to take care and do what
right,
they need to do.
right,
But because you were so used to doing it, you didn't know how to take your hands off of it.
right. Yeah, I wasn't able to. I always, especially there the last couple of years, I felt like because a lot of times this would happen if anybody else was in charge of it or doing it in my absence, it didn't get done correctly, and therefore I had to clean up the mess. And with Brian, not saying that I was more intelligent than a nurse with her bachelor's degree, but I knew the ins and outs of his caregiving, and you know people just do things differently. They have different opinions. They want to try different things, and they don't know the outcome until they know the outcome. And if I knew the outcome was going to affect him in a negative way, I just did it myself. And that means that I had very, very heavy shoulders on very little sleep. So,
Listen, and then meanwhile, Thompson, Lord, I need some more sleep.
yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And the Lord was like, well, I sent the nurse. You heard that? What is it that they were? The man was like, you get to heaven, and he was like,
Drowning.
Lord,
Yeah. And a helicopter goes by and a life raft and a boat, and I'm standing there.
the Lord gonna save me.
Yeah, I'm begging God to walk on water over here and reach my hand out, and He's sent all these resources.
And even though it may be something different, because one thing I had someone tell me one day, she said, you, and even my husband, he said this to me, he's like, babe, you don't know everything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He was like, that's because you're stuck in doing that one thing all the time. He's
Right.
like, but there's a million other ways that could probably be done and actually save you more time.
Yes. Yes. Andy says something similar to me all the time. He says, "I'm so certainly certain, and I'll be certainly wrong." It used to make me really mad when he said. He would
Until you realize it was the truth.
Yeah, until I started paying attention, and I'm like, well, good grief, I will be so certain. And then when I find out I'm wrong, I'm like, oh.
Been there, done that
Yeah.
recently. My bad. And be like, because in your head, you're like, that's right.
Right.
And then it's like, crap, that was wrong.
Right. Yeah. Like, just a simple example, we do math totally differently. He does math one way, I do math another way. I don't know how, but we'll come up with the same answer. And then it's sometimes it's like, why are you doing it that way? Why are you doing? I don't understand it that way. I don't understand why you're doing it that way. Neither both ways of doing it led to the same result. So it didn't. It in the grand scheme of things, that doesn't matter, But I'd be so certainly certain that he was doing it wrong. And he's a master carpenter builder. He works with numbers all day long.
Meanwhile, sir, you're doing it wrong.
Right. You got to be doing something wrong.
Because for them, like, and my husband is good at doing it too. And he with no paper, no pencil, no calculator. But then he'll put it in the calculator. He'll be like, yeah, that was right. And I'll be like,
Yeah.
how did you do that?
Right.
And I'm like, no, it doesn't matter because God has given him the master's plan. So that's all that matters.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And I didn't understand that in the beginning, but now it's like I tell people all the time, listen to your husband, because baby, listen, that I done messed up enough for you and me.
Right.
Listen to him, because the Lord has given him the master's plan. So when I say that, I make sure I tell people, I'm not saying he's giving him the ultimate plan no, he's giving him the master's plan. So God has given our husbands the heart for his family. And so there's going to be things that we can't see and we don't even understand. But in that moment, if he's saying that, trust me, because I could okay, when it's Andy's talking, and then when it's like the Lord speaking through him,
Right.
and I could tell, and I'm like, okay, girl, you better,
you
better sit down somewhere before you get a whooping.
Right. I mean, yeah. Yep. Andy said to me, and just a few months back, that when was I, because we have an age difference in our marriage, but even without an age difference, I'm a very strong-willed person, and as is he. We're both very type A, but he made a comment in reference to, how many times was it going to take of me, like, trying it my way and not taking his advice, because 9 times out of 10 for me, different things in life are trial and error. And Andy's already at a place where he has suffered those errors. So he kind of knows the way that things need to be done. And being as strong-willed as I am, I want to do things differently, or I'll be so certainly certain that my way is going to work too. And then it doesn't. And, it leaves him feeling pretty frustrated. So he asked me that. But when he said it, I tried not to take offense. I may have a little bit, but I tried not to, because I really felt like it was more coming from God. Like, how many times are you going to try to do things Nikki's way, and not follow exactly what I'm trying to show you to do? Because we're, being a woman, we're emotional creatures. I mean, God made us that way. He knows that we're that way, but it's what matters the most to him is not making decisions based off of our emotions, because then it gets us outside of our his will and the way we're supposed to go.
Exactly. And so this is y'all, she's coming back. So amen.
Yeah, I was gonna say I could come back and
Listen, because I feel like there's more that we can't do it in one session.
Yeah, there is, because I hadn't even tapped into the post Bryce, and that's the real that's the part you'll want to really hear.
Listen, and the thing is, it's gonna help somebody, because what does it say? It says we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony.
Absolutely.
And because we share our testimony, and I used to be one of those people like, so everybody don't have the capacity to hear the whole of your testimony. So sometimes the Lord would be like, this is the part they need to hear.
Right.
And so there's parts that need to be told, so that those who may be right there I'm hearing the cusp of it. They're like right in the middle of it. And they're basically ready to do this. They're ready to throw their hands up and say, you know what? I want a divorce.
Yeah.
You know what? I don't even want to marry you, because you can't be the man that God told me to marry.
Right.
But he really is, because you heard God say he was. But because in this moment, he's hitting a space. Okay. He's hitting that residue of that thing that you've been delivered from, but you didn't get rid of all of it when you went through the deliverance.
Oh yeah, that's good. Amen.
And so they need to hear it. And so I used to do too much sharing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Lord say, okay, it's not bad that you're sharing, but there's some parts everybody, they can't handle it. They don't have the capacity for it. They
Yeah.
may have a coffee cup and you have a barrel, Sophia.
Yes. And see, my best friend and I were praying earlier today, and she prayed that specific thing that I would be able to yield when the Lord was telling me to back off a little and not to overshare. Because sometimes when I get into discussions like this, I have a tendency to just kind of, put it all out there all at once. And like you said, if it's truly for to pull somebody else out of a pit, then they need to hear specifically what they need to hear, and then no more than that.
Yes.
So,
Because everybody does. And I've learned that because I used to be the same way. I
mhm.
used to, and not because I wanted everybody to know everything. It
Right,
was just more so I felt like they needed to hear the whole of the thing when
right.
really they didn't need the
And
whole of it.
yeah,
Yeah.
like I want you to understand, so I'm going to give you all the details. And
Yeah.
like you said, it's not necessary because God can do very much with little.
Yes, exactly. Because it may be one word that they need to hear. They need to hear that the child. Okay, so I I used to be bad at making omelets.
Hmm.
You want to know why?
Wow.
Because I had the stove too high up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I didn't know that's what it was. But one day I took my daughter to a to a birthday party, and
Hmm.
I was talking about omelets, and I was like, man, I don't know if I want to cook my omelet because I've been burning his omelets. Like I hadn't been burning them, but they were starting to get a little brown.
Yeah.
You know, I said, and I don't like that. And then the young boy's his mom said, well, what do you have the stove on? And I was like,
Aha.
now I don't even know how we even got to talking about omelets
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
or breakfast for the next day.
Yeah.
But I needed to say that in that moment because she had the key for me in that
Yeah.
moment.
Right.
Turn the stove down, girl.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I say that omelet came out perfect the next
Yeah.
morning, girl.
It's like
Listen.
your intentions are pure and you know all the steps, but the that was just like naturally what you went to. You like you wanted to do it on high for whatever reason. Maybe your mom did it that way. I don't know.
Yeah.
Something like that. But then, like you said, when you were able to just tweak that one part of the process, things are dramatically different, and that's so much how very much how my testimony is for me and the walk that I've had with the Lord the last several years. It's never been that my intentions haven't been pure or that I didn't have a heart after God's heart or that I didn't handle stress well. It's always been that maybe I was doing all those things and had all those things, but then some different places along the way just needed to be
Sweet.
revealed and
Yeah.
tweaked, and then now it's things have been able to fall in alignment since then.
And and you know what? And that's what we're gonna end this at right here. That your intentions were pure,
Hmm.
and even I'm hearing like now, your hands were clean, but there were just one or two little things along the way that had they been tweaked,
Yeah.
it would have been even more smooth,
Yes.
even more smoother than it
Absolutely.
was. And so, and you learned along the way, because I feel like this episode is going to be about identity.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like where do we find our identity? Are we finding it in the right thing? Because our intentions are pure, our heart is pure, our hands are clean,
Mhm.
but because there's some little bitty adjustments that need to be made. Like when I work in the lab and we have a what is it called, centrifuge.
Mhm.
It has to be calibrated ever
Mhm.
so often,
Yeah.
because if not, it's going to be off balance.
That's a good example. Yep. That's very much how it feels too. Like, girl, you need to be some calibration in some different
Come
ways.
on.
Yes.
Yes. It has to be done, because
Mhm.
if not, then it's not going to spin those tubes down the way they need to be spun
Right.
down.
Right. Yep.
And so we're going to end this episode basically saying, are you ready for recalibration?
All right.
Ooh.
That's
Girl,
great.
listen. Oh my, I'm excited
That's
because ooh, I can't wait.
I do
Y'all,
too.
We only did 2 questions.
I know, and I appreciate your time. I'm so thankful for this opportunity. I just knew that this was going to not only help others, but also help open my eyes to some things that I've been learning here lately. So I'm very grateful. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I can't wait, y'all. This is just part 1. We're gonna have part 2, so y'all get ready, because I'm telling you right now, I only see the episodes getting better. And because the ministry that the Lord has given me is a ministry of healing and deliverance, I see a lot of deliverance and healing coming forth.
Amen.
I can't wait. And not just for those, like you said, not just for those. It is for everybody that's listening. But then the Lord is saying, you gonna get yours too.
Yeah.
You're sharing it. So as you're sharing it, you're gonna get healed. As you're sharing it, deliverance is coming forth for you. So I'm excited, Nikki.
Thank you. I am too.
I feel like you're just be my co-host for the whole season. I just feel like listen, because I feel like we could get it done. Ooh, I'm excited. We're gonna recalibrate. The Lord is gonna recalibrate us. I love it. I love it. And so you guys join us for the next episode. I'm bringing Miss Nikki back, okay? That's my sister. She ain't y'all sister. I mean, but amen. We just right now she mine, and y'all can have her later.
I can't wait to be back.
Yes, I'll be excited. So we love you guys, and tune in for the next episode. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for joining us this week. Join us again next week so we can continue to grow as wives and wives in waiting.